yung bangkay ng mga naging biktima, no? Kahit ng mga inosenteng biktima ng war on drugs?
Siyempre yung mga sa salvaging. Pero alam niyo po about the Senate inquiry. I was the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights, but I was able to preside or conduct only an inquiry for 3 hearings. Kasi po after the 3rd hearing, kung saan pinisenta ko po si Edgar Matobato, ay inalis na po ako bilang chairperson of that committee by the majority of my colleagues then. So iba na po yung nagpatuloy. Because in that Senate inquiry, gusto ko sana talagang tukuyin na yung mga killings na yan, starting in 2016, are really state-sponsored or state-inspired. Kaya lang, as I would remember, may naka-ready actually na about 13 CHR witnesses from the CHR na pinovide sa Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights. Pero 2 pa lang po yung na-present ko, and also si Mr. Edgar Matobato, but I was already ousted as a CHR chairperson. Now, after the 3rd hearing, what I recall is that 3 more hearings were done under a new chairperson. Pero, it was abruptly terminated kasi they did not even call the other available CHR witnesses na ready sanang i-present before I was ousted as CHR chairperson. They did not even present them. So ang nangyari, they issued the findings, the resolution, and one of the core finding is that there's no evidence that the killings at that time were actually state-sponsored. Something that I wanted to prove sana kung hinayaan lang po ako. Although of course I could understand that perhaps it was such a tough job, a tough challenge for me to prove it. Especially that nandyan pa yung dating Pangulo sa poder, na nahihirapan pa na talagang kumuha ng mga iba pa, ng mga witnesses, especially from within. Hindi katulad po ngayon na naglalabasan na po sila. May mga insiders na po na sinasabi na kung ano yung mga nalalaman nila, but not during that time. Pero I wanted to do it. After sana the presentation of those CHR witnesses, these are individual accounts of individual cases of summary execution during operations, yung mga sinasabi nilang nanlaban, pero hindi naman pala nanlaban. I was also looking at the medical certificates, the various medical certificates that we got. Marami po yun. At ang dami talagang mga kaduda-duda doon. And of course, we summoned then PNP Chief Bato de la Rosa and other officials of the PNP, but they were all denying that these are the workings of PNP forces or that these are cases of EJKs and let alone state-sponsored killings. So yun po. So nothing came out. It was almost a whitewash.
Kindly wrap up, please.
Yes, huling topic, Mr. Chair, since na-present din ang relation ng ating local law dun sa ICC or yung International Criminal Court. Since some camps would say na hindi dapat tayo maging open sa quote-unquote intervention, no? Ganon yung tinatawag sa mga hakbang na ginagawa ng International Criminal Court since dapat daw ay ipatupad natin yung ating sariling batas. Huwag daw tayong pumayag na panghimasukan tayo. No? Ganon yung pagtingin sa ginagawa ng ICC. But since Senator Laila mentioned yung Section 17 ng RA 9851, tama po ba yung aking interpretation, Mr. Chair, na pinapatupad pa rin naman natin yung ating local law, which is yung RA 9851, if the Philippine government cooperates with the International Criminal Court? Dahil sa committee nga po natin, Mr. Chair, sa Committee on Human Rights and Committee on Justice, we approved a resolution. We are urging, as part of the legislative, we are urging the executive na mag-cooperate sa ICC when it comes to this war on drugs. So, ibig sabihin, Mr. Chair, we are not surrendering our sovereignty we are actually implementing the intent of our domestic laws kapag mag-ooperate ang Philippine government sa ICC. Tama po ba yung aking pagtingin, Mr. Chair?
Tama po yan, Mr. Chair and Your Honors. Dahil nga nandyan ang batas. In fact, nauna pa yan, 2009, before the Senate ratified the Rome Statute. But yung Rome Statute po was signed as early as 2000. I was just reminded by Attorney Conte earlier that it was actually signed by the former President Erap Estrada. Kaya lang, the ratification took some time. So it was only in 2011. But before that, pinasa nga itong RA 9851. And sa pagbabasa ko nga po ng mga provisions ng 9851, it is as if those who pushed for that are actually anticipating that there would be an international body that would be coming in or would be involved in the investigation of crimes that would fall under any of those crimes cognizable by ICC, including crimes against humanity. Kaya nila siguro pinasok yung Section 17 na yan. Malinaw sa akin na kahit may investigasyon tayo dito, pwede pa tayong makipag-cooperate. And there's nothing in the Rome Statute which says, except the complementarity principle, na ang hinihintay kasi ng ICC ay yung genuine investigation focusing on those with the highest or the greatest responsibility. If I may just quote from the ICC pretrial chambers decision in January 26, 2023, decision authorizing the resumption of the investigation. Ang naging conclusion nila, kaya they ordered for the resumption of the proceedings of the ICC investigation at dinismiss nila yung appeal ng Philippine government. And I quote, "The domestic proceedings in the Philippines do not sufficiently mirror the expected scope of the court's investigation, since they only address the physical low-ranking perpetrators and at present do not extend to any high-ranking officials." Further, the ICC pretrial chamber said, "The chamber finds that the PH has failed to demonstrate that the Philippines has failed to demonstrate that it has conducted relevant investigations and prosecution with respect to 4 issues." This was in 2023, as I said, ito yung decision nila authorizing the resumption. Number 1, the alleged killings in Davao from 2011 to 2016, which is within the duration of the ICC investigation. Pwede lang kasi mag-imbestiga yung ICC from yung sa 2011 up to 2019 when the withdrawal became effective. Number 2, crimes other than murder committed in connection with the war on drugs. 3, the killings outside official police operations, meaning yung mga riding in tandem. Yung mga, hindi natin sigurado kung mga police ba yan or are these agents of police officers, yung mga assassins. And number 4, and this is very important, the responsibility of individuals beyond the physical perpetrators of the alleged crimes. So ang hinihintay nila, yung mga tunay na investigasyon targeting or involving yung mga nasa taas, beginning with the former president, who is clearly the mastermind, as he induced the killings. And that is becoming clearer and clearer as nakikita natin dito sa mga lumalabas sa Quadcom hearing. Then that is the complementarity principle. Since hindi pa nila nakikita may tunay na investigasyon, and when they say investigation or proceedings, they are clearly referring to criminal proceedings. So ito pong magiging resulta ng Quadcom. Fine, I think we can be hopeful and optimistic na may mga lalabas. Pero later po, o may lalabas na resolusyon na can also categorically identify yung mga nasa taas based on the evidence na makakalap o kinakalap na ngayon ng Quad Committee. But later, kung hanggang doon lang po at hanggang doon lang yung mga gagawin din ng Kongreso, because ang mandato ng Kongreso is, in aid of legislation to enact laws, it could only recommend to the other relevant agencies and offices kung ano pa ang mga dapat gawin, including the investigation. Kung wala talaga yung investigation na yan, hindi po natin pwedeng pigilan ang ICC. Because yun na yung sinabi nila. Kasi hindi pa naman talaga tina-target, puro lang sa low level. Tsaka yung ICC is not actually focusing on the low level. It's not possible for them to look into each and every case of killings under war on drug. Kaya doon sila nakatuon sa mga those with the greatest responsibility. So,
Okay,
yun po.
so to wrap up, Mr. Chair,
This is your last question, Congressman
Yes.
Manuel. Thank
yes,
you.
so just a closing manifestation, Mr. Chair, na batay dun sa mga narinig natin, edi habang yung mga nasa tuktok kasi dati na ngayon ay dapat sanang sumagot sa mga tanong natin ay naghahanap ng iba't ibang paraan para makaiwas o parang nakikipag-patintero tayo sa kanila, Mr. Chair. Kaya sa totoo lang, dapat ay ma-exhaust natin yung iba't ibang mga paraan para talaga maisulong yung hustisya para dun sa mga naging biktima ng extrajudicial killings. At bahagi niyan, Mr. Chair, habang meron tayong mga ganitong investigasyon, actually, yung pagsulong din ng investigasyon ng ICC, it complements our efforts dito sa bansa natin. And also, Mr. Chair, yung fact din na dahil nga mula sa Davao ay in-apply on a nationwide scale kung ano yung kanilang approach dun sa Davao at intelligence funds yung ginamit nila doon. We also observe a pattern, Mr. Chair, na from just 250 million pesos na level ng intelligence funds for the Office of the President, lumobo pa ito to 1.25 billion pesos. Kaya, Mr. Chair, malaki yung posibilidad talaga na ito din ay isa sa pinagmulan ng pera para mapagana yung peke at madugong war on drugs. Kaya dapat din ay mabusisi natin paano yan ginamit ng Duterte administration. Yun lang,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
thank
Maraming
you,
salamat.
Chair.
Thank you, Congressman Manuel.
Mr. Chair, can I just add very, very short?
Okay, please,
meron po
Senator,
kasing sinabi
make it
si,
short. Yeah.
Honorable Manuel. Isa pa ho sa sinabi ng ICC pre-trial chamber in concluding na it does not sufficiently mirror their investigation, itong mga proceedings, whatever proceedings were being conducted as of 2023. Ang sabi po, any ongoing domestic investigation, at least that's as of 2023, has failed to inquire into any pattern of criminality or the systematic nature of crimes. So gusto po yan i-establish ng ICC dahil hindi pa nila nakita yan sa mga investigasyon dito. The pattern of criminality or the systematic nature of crimes o yung state policy angle. Yun po ang dapat tingnan din.
Okay,
Thank you po.
Thank you, Senator De Lima. Before we proceed with the next interpellator, let me remind the honorable members of the committee that we have invited several resource persons for today's committee hearing. And as much as we would like to ask questions or interpellate our resource person, former Senator Laila De Lima, there are other equally important resource persons that we have invited with regard to the issue of EJK. So if I may request the honorable members to shorten our questions. We will have several opportunities because this is not the first and the last that we will invite Senator Laila De Lima. There will be several opportunities for all of us to be able to ask questions on the issue. Now, the next interpellator is Congressman Rog Gutierrez. You have 10 minutes, and please shorten our interpellations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll just be directing my questions to the former Senator De Lima, and I'll try to make it quick, Mr. Chair. To the Chair, most respectfully, just to give us a background po, no? Kasi I'm sure we'll have more opportunities in later time. But just to lay the base for the interpellation that we're having, for the inquiry that we're having, could you please give us a background through the Honorable Chairman of your service? Because as I understand, you were previously chairwoman for the CHR, is that correct? And after that, you were the secretary for the DOJ from 2010 to 2015.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Your Honors.
And then senator from 2016 to 2022.
Yes, sir.
Prior to your stint as in the CHR, may we know of your track service po in relation, anything that would be relevant to the investigation on the EJK?
My first government service was as CHR chairperson. Before that, I was a practitioner, an election law practitioner. Actually, I didn't have any background in human rights before I was appointed by the former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo as CHR chairperson. So I was an election law practitioner. So that was my area of expertise. Very limited lang po yung exposure ko ng human rights before I joined the Commission on Human Rights.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given that background, I guess for the purposes of our inquiry on EJK, it would be appropriate to limit the interpellation for the years 2018 up to the up to now, since she still is espousing this as her advocacy. So, Mr. Chair, maybe we ask just to clarify, during your stint at the CHR in 2008 to 2010, this was when you started the investigation into the Davao Death Squad.
Yes, Your Honor, 2009.
2009. And what is the result of this? How do you call this? Is this an inquiry? Is this
Yes, it was actually a public inquiry. We held several public hearings right there in Davao City. In fact, one of the resource persons that we summoned, and the very first resource person that we summoned was then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte. We also summoned some other officers, especially in the police force and barangay captains, etc. Now, I was saying earlier that yung mga nakausap kasi namin ng mga insiders, kasi at that time, hindi pa namin nakausap sila Matobato and si Las Cañas. Their names were already mentioned, but we never met them before. Nung sa Senate inquiry na lang sila lumabas. So, yung sabi ko po kanina, nahirapan nga kami nung una because we have to really hold very discreet and mga nagtatago kami nun whenever we were interviewing these witnesses, and we have to use aliases. Of course, they gave us the names, the true names, but they said they should not be revealed, their true names. So, natapos namin yung hearings, but hindi ko na po natapos yung pinaka-report because I was already appointed as DOJ Secretary. Although, as I said, I do have with me the personal investigation notes, which I actually shared with the CHR, yung pagkakatanda ko po noon. And the CHR later came up with this resolution in June 2012. Meron din po sila mga findings doon. But yung iba po, marami po doon sa mga personal investigation notes na hindi na po nila nasama doon sa CHR resolution. I have no personal knowledge about the deliberations of the CHR and bank nung wala na po ako. Kasi which resulted in their resolution issued in June of 2012. Ang alam ko po, ang natatandaan ko po sa resolution na yon of 2012 is one of their recommendations is to investigate and file administrative and criminal charges against then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte and police officers who were identified to be members of the Davao Death Squad.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, so from 2008 to 2010, your stint as chairperson
2008.
2008 to 2010, you started the investigations. You've had a few public hearings. You were not around for the resolution. But the resolution in June 2012, there was one of the recommendations was to start an investigation. This was at the time that you were already Secretary of Justice, is this correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you start any investigation in relation to the filing of this resolution?
The resolution was directed also to the Ombudsman and also to investigative agencies to conduct further investigation. I gave instructions to our NBI to follow through with the findings. Although my information then was that nahihirapan din sila. They could not even trace those witnesses anymore. So, si Matubato nga po, even if he was covered under the Witness Protection Program, eventually he left dahil hindi pa naman natapos yung investigation na yung supposedly follow-through investigation din ng NBI.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, and just for the record, since 2012 and the stint was over by 2015, in a span of 3 years, I understand it would be hard to really ready a case and it would have spilled over. However, Mr. Chair, just a quick question. Yung personal notes po that you mentioned and that you submitted to the ICC, is this an official document?
It's a personal investigation notes because it contained the facts, the information that we got from several witnesses. As I recall, shinare ko ho yun dun sa CHR team as part of the records of the investigation of the DDS. But this cannot be considered official because this was not really formally adopted, as far as I know, by the CHR and bank nung umalis na po ako.
So it was not, Mr. Chair, it was not adopted by the CHR since it's personal in nature. However, it has been accepted by the ICC. Is that correct?
Yes, I shared it. As I recall, although I cannot really say categorically kung talagang naipa-share ko yun because I was one of those who submitted actually a communication with the ICC. The supplemental communication. I must have mentioned that there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, for the last question, for the last topic on the background, the professional government background, this is your Senate stint from 2016 to 2022, in which you held 3 public hearings on the EJK. May you know what was the status at the end of that? I understand under our rules we can take notice of proceedings in the Senate, but for the benefit of everyone here, and especially those who might not have not been part of the government at the time, may we know what was the result of that inquiry, or was it just abruptly stopped?
The Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights, chaired by another senator, because I was no longer the chair, issued a resolution, I think, if I'm not mistaken, December of 2016. I also submitted a dissenting report, a 144-page dissenting report. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Senate resolution made a conclusion that there's no evidence that the killings then were state-sponsored. And may mga recommendations there, but not about filing of cases against Mr. Duterte because nga yung hindi naman tinapos, there was an abrupt termination of those proceedings. As I mentioned, hindi nga present lahat yung mga available CHR witnesses. So it was never pursued and it's no longer surprising na ganun yung naging conclusion nila na hindi daw po state-sponsored. Although they made several good recommendations about reforms in the PNP system, etc., etc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, moving forward, of course, chronologically, this is no longer part of your government service, but we can't escape the fact that cases were filed against you po. May we just know what is the status of these cases right now? Because, of course, this would come into the... some people might ask, some people might question the credibility of your presence here as a resource person. So we'd just like to know po, how many cases were filed and what is the status of each of these?
There were 3 drug-related cases filed against me. Initially, as consummated illegal drug trading. Illegal drug trading, consummated. But later, it was amended by the prosecution into conspiracy to commit illegal drug trading. I think they realized that they could not really make out a good case for consummated illegal drug trading kasi wala nga sila yung mga real evidence, wala yung corpus delicti, walang evidence of what exactly the kind of drugs that I allegedly traded, money trail, paper trail, wala lahat yun. So they amended those cases into conspiracy to commit illegal drug trading in the hope that sufficient na yung mga magiging testimonial evidence nung mga witnesses, mostly believed drug lords or believed inmates. And all 3 cases now have been dismissed. I've been acquitted. These are definitely trumped-up charges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the 3 cases were already dismissed. Have any of them been dismissed by virtue of a demurrer to evidence, or it was all sought?
Yes,
it was
the
all
2 of
pursued?
them. Among the 3, the first one was the grant of the demurrer to evidence. The second one was acquittal. And the third one was grant of demurrer to evidence. Now, the acquittal, the second case, ang alam ko po, ay inappeal pa ng Office of the Solicitor General to the Court of Appeals, which is clearly violative of the principle against double jeopardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just note po, no, given the credibility of our witness, and it's very important to note that the first and third were dismissed by virtue of a filed demurrer to evidence, which means that the prosecution did not have evidence to the point that the defense no longer needed to present their own. So, Mr. Chair, moving forward, just a quick question now that we're going to the meat, and I think we understand the former senator attended one of our hearings prior under the Committee on Human Rights. However, at the time, wala pa po yung revelation ni Colonel Garma. So I think it really changes everything now that we have the revelations of Colonel Garma and the corroborative evidence that somehow the so-called Davao template was sought to be replicated in nationwide scale. We'd just like to ask, given we're lucky you have our resource person here comes today wearing multiple hats. She was the commissioner of the CHR, which the task actually is to be a counter-check to our authorities. At the same time, she served as part of the structure of the authorities when she was Secretary of the Justice. And finally, while she was part of the Legislative and the Senate, she actually filed an inquiry on EJK. So given your extensive knowledge of this, and that you've had a background from the local up to the point, and even chronologically up to the point in time in which supposedly there was already that progression from local to national. Could you please educate us? Because one thing that I think that we have to be concerned with is the so-called labeling of the war on drugs versus the EJK, extrajudicial killing. Because po, as we understand, based on the testimony of Colonel Garma, yung war on drugs po is under the auspices of authority. It is being conducted under the organization of the Philippine National Police, supposedly. Whether these elements of the PNP were working within or outside of the authority of the PNP, that doesn't escape the fact that it's more aligned to the state-sponsored element. However, when we talk about the EJK, and specifically in your inquiry on the DDS, we're talking more of the vigilante killings. And I believe last time there was a presentation, I believe it was Attorney Conti. May we ask you very quickly to Attorney Conti, Mr. Chair, I understand in your presentation last time there was a distinct point in time in which the war on drugs transitioned from vigilante killings onto state-sponsored police operations. Can you please elucidate on that once again?
Yes, according to the data, the information from media reports, in the first 3 to 6 months of the war on drugs, it started with vigilante killings, and then eventually it transitioned to police perpetrated killings. So dito na po nagsimula bandang 2017 yung talagang police operations, whether by bust, arrest warrants, or search warrants.
Thank you, Attorney Conti. Mr. Chair, so back to the former Senator De Lima. In your investigation of the so-called DTS, were you also investigating the police sponsor, the state side aspect of the war on drugs, or was this purely on the vigilante?
It also included the police side, the PNP, the official, because of the HCIS, the Heinous Crimes Investigation Section. That was part of the official organizational structure of the DCPO, then the Davao City Police Office. So yung mga naging member, especially the original members of that Heinous Crimes Investigation Section were actually the DDS members, as testified on or attested to by, especially by Arturo Las Cañas. So it's not just the killings by the riding in tandem, the unknown assassins, but precisely the structure which points to the fact that these are headed, especially the handlers, by policemen under the DCPO. Yan po ang pagkakatanda ko dun sa mga nakuha naming impormasyon. So already covered
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, the former senator has now confirmed, aside from the vigilante killings, the riding in tandem, and the Sinaloa-style killings, according to Attorney Conti, there were also police operations involved. Can you confirm for us, through the chairman, of course, the operational aspect of the police? This would include yung mga nanlaban in legitimate police operations and buy-bust operations. Was this something that was investigated in the locality of Davao during your time as CHR?
Yeah, some aspect of it, because nga of the organizational structure. Because indeed, policemen were handling the operations. Yung mga sinabi ko pong, excuse me, yung mga sinabi ko pong pangalan, SPO4 Sanson Benaventura as the Logistics Finance and Death Clearance Officer, SPO3 Arturo Las Cañas as overall team leader for operations and planning, sila SPO4 Bienvenido Laud as team handler, SPO3 Jim Tan as team handler. They were then, as far as I know, as far as I could recall from the records, they were then active police officers, but assigned to this HCIS, or Heinous Crimes Investigation Section, in charge of those killings.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the clarification. However, I think most respectfully, we have to clarify po, their being members of the PNP should be distinguished from the operations being undertaken by the PNP. Because while we have confirmed, based on your testimony, that they are confirmed to be active members of the uniformed personnel, but if the way that the EJK was conducted was solely limited to the vigilante side, we're talking about Sinaloa killings, abduction, riding in tandem, extrajudicial. This would be different from the the police operation side. Because what we've seen based on the operations, they come in two forms. You have, usually when we're talking about the HVT, the high value target, this would rely on vigilante killings that we would see and have seen based on testimony also of Colonel Garma. But we also have to consider that for the supposedly legitimate operations in which later on there is supposedly allegedly planting of evidence, nanlaban, drug bust or buy bust, which has gone wrong. I think this would be considered as under the auspices of a legitimate police operation. Now, my question to the former senator, to the honorable chairman, is that was this part of the so-called DDS operations in the locality? Because what I'm talking about here, what we're basing on, the testimony of Colonel Garma is talking about the nationwide scale, and we've seen it. The testimony of Attorney Conti, we're talking nationwide, we've seen both vigilante and police operations. My question now is, at least for the investigation of the DDS in Davao, did this involve, because I understand there's the HCIS and that they were active members of the police force, but did they employ buy-bust operations and nanlaban to perpetrate this so-called war on drugs?
To answer your question, Your Honor, I have to point out that the nanlaban concept actually originated in Davao and invented by the DDS. So it's not something new. There may be fewer cases then, kasi karamihan nga is the riding in tandem, mga vigilante killings as induced by then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte. But there were also specific cases na ganon, because the nanlaban concept actually originated from the DDS operations.
Thank you for that confirmation. So although it might have been a few, it's not novel. There was an nanlaban and there was supposedly legitimate police operations conducted in the locality.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Chair, one more question on that. Given that the transition from the local to the national, from the local it was talking about barangay to LGU level, city. Of course, it would take a lot of expanding for it to go into national level. And we've had through the PNP now we're talking about yung double barrel, upland double barrel. You have the tokhang and then the high value targets. Was this something that you also saw being conducted in Davao at the time that you were conducting your investigation to the DDS? Or was this purely mostly skewed towards the vigilante side?
Okay, the upland tokhang and then later the upland double barrel, they became more pronounced, and as they became official operations because of that PNP circular. No, I don't remember any evidence or any document or any information that there is such an official operations plan that could be similar to the Oplan Tokhang or Oplan Double Barrel. But, as I said earlier, meron din mga nanlaban operations. So, These are actually implemented by certain police officers in Davao. So I would not know how they call them, but I'm sure there are really such plans. Kasi nga, there's organizational structure, again, based on on Arturo Lascañas' information, it's then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte who was the very head of the Davao Death Squad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the last point, given that there might be some differences, it might not have been formalized, but we see a pattern. But
Yes.
most distinctly is that you have confirmed just earlier that there was a rewards and payment scheme. And I think this is what's very important for us here in this inquiry today, given that this has basically been confirmed by Colonel Garma. Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, I still have more questions regarding the policy, operation, and organizational parallelisms between the investigation perhaps that they had on the DDS and the inquiry that we have now in the EJK. But given that we have more research persons and more colleagues who would like to interpolate, I will now yield for that time. Thank you very much, former Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Gutierrez. Before we proceed with the next interpolator, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Congressman Ron Salo and Congressman Roman Romulo. Welcome to the committee hearing of the Quadcom. Just an interjection on the question raised by Congressman Gutierrez with respect to the issue on the reward money. In the investigation you have conducted in Davao when you were still with CHR, has there been a determination as to where the reward money came from?
Yung po ni Arturo Lascañas na intel funds of the Office of the Mayor.
Is there
Kasama
any-
yon. As to any other sources, I have to check again my notes on that, kung meron pang other sources of the rewards.
But this particular issue has been stated in the report you have submitted, I believe.
No, that's in the affidavit of Arturo Lascañas. And also, when I made the presentation about the DDS reward system according to the CHR witness, kasama po yan. Although I don't recall if that witness actually pointed to the very source of that reward.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you for that information. So we now proceed with the next interpolator. The next is Congresswoman Franz Castro. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maiksi lang naman to kasi yung ibang question at natatanong na. Tanong ko lang sa PNP, Mr. Chair. May binanggit kasi si former Senator De Lima about yung mga personalities like SPO4, Samson Buenaventura, alam naman natin kung nasaan si Arturo Lascañas, Bienvenido Laud, and SPO3 Jim Tan. So sa PNP po, active po ba ito kung nag-retire na, Mr. Chair? Sa PNP.
Earlier, Congressman Paduano moved for the issuance of a show cause order to
For them. To them.
to
For-
Sunny
Sanson
Buenaventura and
Buenaventura.
Sanson Buenaventura one and the same?
I believe so, Your Honor.
Okay.
So there was already a motion
okay.
to issue a show cause order.
Yes, thank you,
And
Mr. Chair.
may I know what's the name of that gentleman over there? What?
Sir, good afternoon. Brigadier General Chinayog, the Acting Director of Personnel and Records Management ng PNP po, sir. As to the question of the good Congresswoman, we will find out sa aming records, sir, kung existing yung tao. And we will give the feedback. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Congresswoman Castro, please
Thank you,
proceed.
Mr. Chair. So meron tayong according to Secretary Senator De Lima, yung RA 9851 on the legal basis kung pwedeng natin makasuhan. So pwede na po ba itong magamit ng ating mga pamilya na biktima ng EJK to prosecute po yung si Duterte at saka iba pang mga perpetrator ng EJK?
Opo, malinaw naman po that it covers crimes against humanity. Na yung EJ case, yung the magnitude, the extent of the EJ case na nakita natin, na lumalabas na ngayon, at yung mga testimony ng mga families, and other sources then, no, it's certainly a case of a crime against humanity, specifically of murder. Kasi systematic and deliberate targeting of a civilian population. And we are talking about the alleged drug offenders.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gusto nating malinaw yun, ma-emphasize yun dahil medyo matagal pa yung ICC, no? At itong ating mga pamilya ay pamilya ng mga biktima ng EJK ay matagal na, Mr. Chair, no, naghahanap ng accountability and justice. Kaya pwede yun. About yung pattern in criminality, di ba sinasabi ng ICC na parang wala pa silang nakikita. So yung example po ng pattern sa Davao, yung DDS, as regards to the national, hindi ba meron na yung pattern? Kasi sa instruction, according to the testimony of Garma, sinasabi na ipapattern yung national scale na tokhang or yung yung war on drugs on the Davao So, di ba meron na siyang pattern, Mr. Chair?
Opo,
Can we
makikita natin na nandiyan ang pattern. Pero pwede pang dagdagan yan, pwede pang makakuha pa ng mga indications, mga factors na pwede talaga nating sabihin na may pattern of criminality. Yung tungkol naman po sa ICC, ang sinabi ko po is that one of the reasons or one of the main reasons kung bakit they authorized the resumption of investigation after junking the appeal of the Philippine government is that hindi pa nga nila, wala silang nakikita na any proceedings in our country, especially criminal proceedings, they're trying to establish the pattern. Pero hindi ho natin alam, baka yung ICC, dahil alam ko po, seryoso talaga sila, nakafocus talaga sila, ay baka na-establish na yan, the pattern of criminality and yung pattern ng killings.
Okay.
And
Mr. Chair, kung magsasampa ang pamilya o biktima ng EJK dito ito using the 9851, so would this affect po yung investigation sa ICC?
it would depend on kung ano makita ng ICC na magiging progress of the case. Na baka hanggang filing of complaint lang. But as to really the gathering of the necessary evidence, baka kulangin. Or baka hindi na maging talagang, hindi katulad nung ginagawang, alam ko, talagang masigasig sila. And these are expert investigators. And na kumakalap na talaga, baka nga malapit na silang matapos sa kanilang investigation. We certainly hope na matatapos na yung ICC investigation, at least in so far as to try to trigger the next step, which is the issuance of the warrant of arrest.
Thank you. At tingin nyo, Senator Lima, nakakatulong itong ginagawa ng Quadcom?
Yes.
Okay.
Sa tingin
Yun lang
ko
po, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Castro. The next to interpolate is Congressman Bong Teves. You have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Former Senator Laila de Lima earlier said, address to Colonel Expedido, magsabi ka ng totoo. May I ask to the Colonel Expedido, ano ba ang ibig sabihin ni former Senator Laila de Lima na magsabi ka ng totoo?
Your Honors, Mr. Chair, halata naman na na-dismiss niya yung kaso niya na parang sinabi niya talaga na inosente siya. Sa akin naman nung mag-umpisa, sa Senate pa lang, sinabihan ko na the truth will set her free. Because I believe na ganun lang talaga ang nangyari kay ma'am. When in fact, I talked personally kay Mayor Espinosa at the time na nagdala na siya ng testimony niya from Camp Crami na mag-turn over sa akin na ang masabi lang niya, nagkita lang doon sila sa Bagyo. So, sa akin as Chief of Police at dati investigator, hindi man kadali ganon na mag-file tayo ng complaint sa isang dala lang ang pangalan. Kaya, I doubt at first na talagang hindi totoo yun. Pero as Chief of Police na mag-file lang ng complaint, endorsement doon sa department, sa institution na yun ang talagang papuntahan, hanggang doon lang ako. No? But as I've said, na I doubt, kaya nagsabi ako sa kanya na the truth will set her free. And when in fact, kinamayan ko si ma'am right after sa Senate ko natandaan ni ma'am, pinuntahan ko siya na naghingi ako ng sorry. Sorry talaga ma'am, but the truth will set you free. Doon lang ang sa akin, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Can I say something, Your Honor? If I may.
Congressman
Teves.
former Senator Laila de Lima, ma'am, yun po ba ang gusto mong ipaalam o gusto mong mangyari na sabihin, ano ba talaga po ang gusto mong sabihin kay Colonel Espinido na magsabi siya ng totoo?
Senator?
Okay. Nasagot na ho niya ng konti, partially, yung gusto ko sanang marinig sa kanya. Na sinasabi niya na the truth shall set you free. Yes, nasabi niya po sa akin yan. So ang ibig pong sabihin nun ay yung mga sinabi nila noon during the Senate inquiry ay hindi totoo. Ayaw lang niyang aminin. Ang gusto ko po sana na marinig sa kanya, yung sinabi ni Mr. Kerwin Espinosa during the last hearing na kinausap silang tatlo ni then PNP Chief Bato de la Rosa, now Senator, na ayusin yung mga testimonya nyo para nagkakatugma-tugma. Although I think Colonel Espinido will remember na kahit nga ganun na yung kanilang naging guidance or instruction from then PNP Chief Bato de la Rosa, hindi pa rin naging tugma yung kanilang mga sinabi during the Senate inquiry. Kasi in the first place, yung kilala ba ni Mr. Espinido, si Ronnie Dayan, kilala ba ni Kerwin Espinosa, si Ronnie Dayan, sinasabi na, sabi ni Kerwin Espinosa, na-meet daw niya si Mr. Ronnie Dayan through Colonel Espinido. Pero alam niya po yan, alam niya ni Colonel Espinido na hindi po totoo yan. Yung sinasabi about yung nagkita sa Burnham Park, yung pinakita po nilang supposed evidence of my alleged involvement in the illegal drug trade of Mr. Kerwin Espinosa ay yung picture na yan na pinapakita na mukha ngang nasa Burnham Park. Ang mukha ngang nagkita kami doon o na whatever, yung hindi ko alam kasi hindi ko naman siya kilala nung minute ko siya o na-meet ko sa Burnham Park kasi ang dami pong nagpapapicture doon. So the first time that I saw Mr. Kerwin Espinosa was nung nag-appear na siya sa Senate inquiry. Yun po sana yung gusto kong malinawan sa kanya. Tama ba yun? Sinabi ni Kerwin Espinosa na actually kinausap silang tatlo para maging tugma-tugma yung kanilang script.
Mr. Chair, may I ask Colonel Espinido to respond sa sinabi ni former Senator de Lima. Kasi unang-una, sa nakikita ko po na pag-uusap ngayon, parang lumalabas, isa po sa mga players, si Colonel Espinido sa pagkakakulong ni Senator de Lima. Dahil yung mga, as a Chief of Police, tama po kayo, nagbe-base po kayo sa mga testimonya. Pero, ibig sabihin, alam nyo, yung testimonya ng mga binibase nyo is may kunting mali na hindi tama. Dahil, bakit kayo kakausapin ni Senator De La Rosa, the former Chief PNP, na hindi tugma-tugma ang inyong mga testimonya kung hindi kayo bumubuo ng isang kwento?
Thank you, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. Ang una, sinabihan ako ni General Bato na involved ng drugs, tumatanggap kay Kerwin before the Senate. Nung sa Senate na, hindi na ako nirecognize ni Kerwin na nakatanggap ng 20,000. Even in his affidavit, dalawa, wala ako o hindi ako nakasali. And tatlong senator natandaan ko na nag-cross sa kanya na nagsasabi nga siya na si Sir Espinido, hiningian ko ng bank account but ang reply, Bible verse lang. Okay na yon. Pero nadali din ako sa pagdala ni Kirwin ng pangalan ko na ako daw ang dahilan na makilala niya si Dayan. At the time, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, nagbuluntary ako pagbigay sa Senate ng cellphone ko. Na ma-check lang na may number si Dayan sa cellphone ko. Resign ako kaagad. Wala na, nag-wave na ako kaagad, walang abogado, sinabi ko. Kaysa hindi yun makapagtanggi tayo or makapagsinungaling, kung nandyan talaga ang cellphone ni Dayan sa cellphone ko, kung kilala kami ni Dayan, talagang may number ako sa kanya. Doon na nagsalita ang Senate na nagsasabi tayo ng totoo. Kasi bakit matakot tayo, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, na totoo man ang sinabi ko na never din na si Senator Bato, si dati Chief PNP Bato, na magsabi sa akin na okay, yon ang ginawa nyo tatlo, gawin nyo tatlo para magkakaisa yung testimony. Hindi kasi hindi ako sang-ayon lahat kung ano ang isabi sa akin ng senior officer ko. As long na legal yan, and I am one also a victim, sali-sali lang sa lista ng drugs. Nilagyan pa ng high value target si Espinido. So, kaya ako magsasabi din na siguro yung mga lista hindi totoo yun kasi ako nga biktima. Sa mga sinungaling nilagay ni Senator Bato. Thank you, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, hindi kaya nilagay yung pangalan mo dahil hindi ka na sumusunod sa gusto nila sa bandang huli?
That's one of the reasons, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Ilan po ba ang napatay nyo nung panahon sa war on drugs?
Sa war on drugs sa Albuera, ni isang namatay sa Albuera. Sa Ozamis, sa 2 taon ko may siyam. Sa 2 taon. Sa baka namatay sa war against illegal drugs. Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Ilan ang nakuha mong reward?
Kung reward lang, matandaan ko, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, kasi may resolution ang Ozamis, si Mayor Aldong Paruhinog at the time, na kung may makahuli ang pulis ng isang malaking drug poser, may 100,000 na ibigay from the local government unit. So nakakuha kami ng 600,000. Nakatanggap together with the presence of the MILGO na nandoon na ako ang tumanggap ng pera at saka plaque of appreciation na nakahuli tayo ng worth of 600,000 ang binigay ng local government unit sa PNP ng Ozamis, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, di ba pinag-uusapan natin yung reward system na sinabi ni Colonel Garma? Di ba sabi niyo may napatay kayong mga... Alam ko ngayon, ilan yung galing sa nasyonal na pera ang natanggap mo para sa war on drugs? Hindi yung galing sa lokal.
Your Honor, Mr. Chair, siguro sa Ozamis, to tell you the truth, no? Maski tanungin niyo si Sir Bato ngayon kung saan siya. Never nakabigay si Senator Bato na sa akin ng ₱1 since sa pag-upo niya nakasama kami. Never. Lalo na yung reward, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, kaya siyempre, sikreto na yon. Bakit hindi ako pagbigyan? Hindi ako binigyan niya ng legal na suporta naman lang na pagbigyan ako na, Joby, may pampliti mo na lang ng pang-airplane. Magpunta ako ng Krame, Your Honor, Mr. That's the truth. Ano na nangyari?
Thank you
Your time
very
is
much,
up,
Mr. Chair.
Congressman Teves. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Please wrap up. Okay, thank you, Congressman Teves. So the last interpolator before we shift to another resource person for today is Congresswoman Arlene Brosas. You have 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Very, very short lang, Mr. Chair. I have 2 questions, Mr. Chair. The first one is for Senator Laila de Lima. Yung RA 9851 po, may prosecution na ba dito niyan?
Mr. Chair, Your Honors, as far as I know, there's none yet.
Yan. Kaya nyo po minimension yung RA 9851 ay sa pagkakaalam ko because of the Section 17, tama?
Yes, one of those, yes.
Oo. In the interest of justice, the relevant Philippine authorities may dispense with the investigation or prosecution of a crime punishable under this act if another court or international tribunal is already conducting the investigation or undertaking the prosecution of such crime. Instead, the authorities may surrender or extradite suspected or accused persons in the Philippines to the appropriate international court, if any, or to another state pursuant to the applicable extradition laws and treaties. So yun po, parang dahil doon, maaari ito ang maging legal basis para yung akusado ay pwede talagang ma-extradite. And we'll go through the process of the ICC.
Yes, although as you said, maaari, because the law, the provision speaks of may. So it's not something that is mandatory. So it all depends on the relevant Philippine authorities kung gusto nilang gawin yun.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, yung second question ko po ay kay Attorney Maria Cristina Conti. Attorney, Mr. Chair, yung gusto nating malaman, bakit yung mga biktima, they would want na sa ICC magsampa ng kaso? Bakit, 'di ba? Bakit kasi walang walang domestic case. So bakit 'yon ang pinili ng mga biktima?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The timing of the filing of the complaint or the communications before the ICC is also one point to consider. We filed it in 2018 at the height of the Duterte administration and at the height of the killings. First, one of the reasons is that there's presidential immunity for domestic suits. Second, there is complicity of politicians and people in power. There were high officials were complicit in the crimes as suspected. And in fact, they even had officials in the IAS installed. Attorney Triambulo, whom I have identified as one of those appointed by Duterte, so that he could shield officials or police officers from liability. Also, there was security considerations for the victims who may themselves be the subjects of tokhang operations. Politically, it was not conducive to file any criminal charges in the Philippines regarding the war on drugs at that time, because there was also a refusal of the government to consider this as a systematic attack on the people. Until today, actually, the investigation center on individual crimes, and that the working theory, I guess, for the Philippine government is that these are rogue police officers who just violated protocol. And so for us, in the interest of justice, as was mentioned, the ICC at that time was an effective remedy. This was also in the context of the killings of lawyers and judges who in any way was involved in any drug-related cases. Also logistically, and this is different from, this is logistically different from investigations in the Philippines. At the ICC, you file communications, and for the ICC at one point they said they received 53 communications. They tend to look at all these communications all together before starting with an investigation and eventually trial. In the Philippines, you would have to have built a case, and if there were many victims, they would have filed separate charges in different places, and it would be a nightmare to consider them all. So before the International Criminal Court, the Philippine situation is under review, and there is no case yet, but it is under one investigation for all acts of widespread and systematic killings, in the acts of murder and other inhumane acts, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ay, nakuha ko po yung gusto kong marinig doon kasi parang hindi talaga level playing field dito sa Pilipinas. And second, hindi pwedeng imbestigahan nila yung mga perpetrators, yung sarili nila. So, Mr. Chair, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
Chair.
Congresswoman
Mr. Chair.
Rosas.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Before we very go quick. to the other, can I just ask for clarification kay Candice Pinito, Mr. Chair?
Okay, you're recognized, Congressman Abante.
Colonel, it was under your watch na napatay si Mayor Navarro and Mayor Spinit and Mayor Parohinog, di ba?
Mayor Espinosa, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Pero nung napatay si Mayor Parahinog, sino ang station commander nun sa Osamis?
Ako ang sa Ozamis, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so
search warrant ng CIDG.
So therefore, nung panahon mo, napatay si Parohinog at si Navarro.
Hindi, si Navarro, si Mayor Espinosa yun, Mr. Chair.
Si Mayor Parohinog.
Si Mayor
ang
Paruhino
napatay.
ang sa Ozamis.
It was under your command at
Yes,
that time.
Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Oo. So yun nabigay sa iyo ng 600,000.
Si Kwan, hindi pa yun nangyari, Mr. Chair, yung pag-operasyon sa application sa search warrant kay Mayor Paruhinog. Mga 4 months, 3 months, mag-umpisa ako sa Ozamis. Si Mayor Paruhinog mismo, Mr. Chair, ang nagbigay ng reward sa mga
Okay.
nahuli.
Nung napatay si Mayor Parahinog, napatay siya under your watch, di ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Nakatanggap ka ba ng reward money?
Wala asa
Wala.
wala. Kay kasi din sa kay Mayor Paruhinog, Mr. Chair, sa illegal possession of firearms at saka hindi application ko sa CIDG yon na
Alin yun?
CIDG ang applicant sa search warrant, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
So
hindi sa akin.
Hindi drugs.
Hindi, sa illegal possession of firearms, Mr. Chair.
Ang inaano ko, nakakalito kasi nung napatay si Mayor Parahinog, ikaw ang station commander nung Osamis, di ba?
Yes.
Oh, sa drugs
Mr.
din
Chair.
yun, correct?
Ang sa kay Mayor Paruhinog, sa title sa search warrant, hindi sa drugs, Mr. Chair.
Ay, hindi. So, sinong nag-utos sa'yo na patayin si Mayor Parahinog?
Hindi naman nag-utos, Mr. Chair, sorry to say that because first, ang applicant, ang officer responsible sa implementation ng search warrant ay ang CIDG. As Chief of Police ng Ozamis, nag-assist kasi area ko ang target, no, yung si Mayor Paruhinog. So nagkataon na kami ang nandyan assign, so sinama ng CIDG as applicant ng search warrant, Mr. Chair.
At nanlaban si Parahinog kaya napatay.
Doon sa implementation kasi nabiruan, may natamaan din kami, investigator ko, Mr. Chair, sa first burst of fire ng pagpunta na namin sa bahay. That is a simultaneous for 6 na search warrant na na-implement doon sa Paruhinog na
Hindi ba
siblings.
si Mayor Navarro napatay din?
Si Navarro namatay sa Cebu yun,
Cebu.
Mr. Chair. Sa Bacolod na ako na-assign.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yun lang.
Thank you, Congressman Abante.
Mr. Chair.
Congresswoman Jinky Luisto.
Very quick.
Very quickly.
I was listening to the interpellation of the Honorable Teves, and I want to clarify for the record the answers of Colonel Espinido. Colonel, were you the one who introduced Kerwin to Ronnie Dayan? Yes or no?
No, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Before the Senate investigation, have you personally known Senator Laila de Lima? Yes or no?
Yes,
How?
Your Honor. Na siya naging head ng CHR, Commission on Human Rights, when I was assigned in Leyte. Nagpunta pa nga si Ma'am sa Samar, kung natandaan niya, sa Samar. Pagkatapos, naging DOJ, Secretary, nag-run for senators, senator din si Ma'am.
In relation to her alleged involvement in drug operation, have you known Senator De Lima before the Senate investigation? Yes or no?
Sa drugs, hindi.
Yes or no?
No, Your Honors.
Before the Senate investigation, have you known Kerwin Espinosa? Yes or no?
Yes, Your Honor.
How?
that he is involved in illegal drugs together with his father.
But in relation to the alleged transaction with Senator Laila de Lima, have you known Kerwin Espinosa before the Senate investigation?
I don't know.
Yes
Your
or
Honor.
no?
No, Your Honor.
Before that Senate investigation, Colonel Espinido, in relation to the alleged involvement of Senator de Lima, have you known Ronnie Dayan?
No, Your Honor.
There's also a testimony coming from Kerwin Espinosa that you and him were instructed to talk with each other to make sure that your testimonies against Senator De Lima is consistent. Do you confirm this? Yes or no?
I confirm, Your Honor.
With your answers to my questions, Colonel Espinido, this afternoon, are you retracting all the testimonies that you gave against Senator De Lima during that Senate investigation?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jinky. Okay, we'd like to thank former Senator Laila de Lima for accepting our invitation to become one of our resource person for today. And we will now move to another resource person that we invited. And we'd like to ask Congressman Dan Fernandez to introduce to the committee the next witness.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, before Chairman Dan will proceed, are we now excusing former Senator De Lima?
Not yet.
If Senator Laila de Lima would wish to stay and remain as a observer of this hearing, you may do so, and we will welcome that. But if you wish to be excused, you will be excused.
Thank you,
Mr.
Your
Chair.
Honor. Thank
Mr.
you,
Chair,
Your Honor. I can
think the
stay for a
present-
little while, and then I'll just leave if I need to leave.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the presence of former Secretary Laila de Lima is so important to us, considering that later on we'll be asking GM Garma a lot of things about the reward system, and it might be we all know that it's corroborating the reward system that was mentioned by GM Garma and the former senator. And we haven't asked yet questions kay GM Garma. We will be tackling, Mr. Chairman, the issue of the killing of Antonio Tony Halili of Tanawan, where GM Garma have mentioned certain personalities in the PNP. And this might involve the reward system that was mentioned by both resource persons. So it is imperative for us to let Senator De Lima to stay a little bit more, Mr. Chairman.
Well, as she stated in her reply to the chair, when we ask her if she wants to stay, she can stay and be an observer. Or if she wants to be excused, she will be excused. So that is clear, Your Honor. So now we proceed with the next witness in our committee hearing today. Congressman Dan Fernandez, please introduce your witness.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. GM Garma, you remember the last time that we asked you about the story of Mr. Tony Halili. You mentioned a certain name from the PNP. A certain, during that time, he was a major, Kenneth Albotra. You remember that?
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
And you mentioned that it was nabida or na-mention sa iyo yung pangalan ni Antonio Halili na kasama siya doon sa nag-operate kay Mr. Tony Halili. Am I right?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Your Honor.
Mr. Chairman, the reason why this representation would like to discuss this matter, because in the last hearing, we invited those personalities that were allegedly involved on this killing of Mr. Tony Halili, Mayor Tony Halili. And Also, Mr. Chairman, during that hearing that we have conducted, I asked Chairman Benny Abante to ask about the issue of what happened to Mayor Cesar Perez of Los Baños. Mayor Cesar Perez, oo, ng Los Baños, na kung saan siya po ay namatay din by these personalities, allegedly, according to this witness that we have invited, na same personalities that were involved in the killing of Tony Halili were also involved in this killing of Mayor Cesar Perez. And we invited these resource persons. And as a matter of fact, ay nandiyan po siya sa loob at magbibigay po siya ng testimony sa atin under oath. And at the same time, he executed an affidavit doon sa mga pangyayari na kung saan allegedly, according to him, naging biktima siya ng EJK sapagkat siya ang naging fall guy. Siya ang kinulong sa loob halos ng 7 buwan, subalit siya ay walang kasalanan. So, there are those victims of EJK that were killed. And there are those who were victim of EJK who suffered, like kay former senator. And this person, a former councilor of the municipality of Los Baños, contacted this representation in order to hear him out doon sa mga pangyayari sa kanila. And at first, hindi po tayo naniwala because we wanted to verify, no, yung mga stories that he mentioned to us. But as it goes, nakita po natin yung mga evidences that he presented. And now, Mr. Chairman,